So as we talk about getting the efficiency and the density of workloads that run and putting them on there, we're not tied to an individual piece of hardware. We can flex and move and have different specs and configurations for customers.
This is the Nutanix Cloud Interlock podcast with your host, Michael Carr.
Welcome back to Nutanix Cloud Interlock, your place to get in the know on all things related to assist you on your cloud journey. We can be talking about bimodal operations, transformation, cloud economics. You're going to find it right here. My good friend, Chris Porter, joining me today. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, and I'm super excited to be back in the chair, having a good old chinwag with yourself about all things cloud and on-premises and how we can help customers to drive success and to drive kind of value from using the cloud, as well as hybrid.
Last point there, hybrid. We've seen cloud native, it's all the way to go. I think we've seen now Gen AI, LLMs, data proliferation at the edge. I think we're definitely here to see hybrid as the way of working for the future. I see data being able to be transposable, transportable, edge, core cloud. Workloads need to be able to move. One of the challenges, Chris, we see with customers is around the cost transparency with that and how do they gain some accurate insights as to utilization, and also how they automatically scale those resources that are required and move them where they need to go.
I think it's such an important point about the benefits of why you should move to kind of cloud. But then it's also the dangers, as you say, about that kind of cost visibility. When I talk about the benefits of moving to cloud, really in my mind, that the ultimate goal is to reduce the gap between delivering value and understanding how much that costs and being able to link the two intrinsically so that when you're not delivering value, maybe it's a seasonal workload or something, that project or that kind of is something new or you're trying to gauge demand for it, then the cost for that scales. But what that means is you have to completely refactor and re-architect that application. So what we're looking for is to try and gain some of those benefits of the cloud without having to realize re-architecting and refactoring every application. So with Nutanix, what we're able to do is we're able to run workloads, say for instance, using our Nutanix Cloud Clusters platform, run workloads in the cloud. There's a certain kind of control that you can get from running in the cloud using bare metal instances. So that's what we leverage. And that allows you to scale with the operation and infrastructure team making a decision of when they add additional instances. So you don't get that bill shock. You're in complete control. And if you need to add additional instances, then you can make that decision and you can actually scale it automatically if you set that up. But also you've got the chance to look at some of our tools around Nutanix Cloud Manager that allows you to look at trends and capacity planning and plan for the future to go, you know what, we're not going to scale here. We're going to speak to some of the application teams and look at can we right size those applications? Is there something we could maybe move on premises because that's now a consistent workload? So you've got that visibility and transparency, but also that portability to move workloads around to place them in the right place for where they need to operate to get the best benefit.
Yeah, another point you touched on there that I really liked, which is I often term the unknown knowns. So this is coming. Sometimes you factor it in, is around those costs for, say, an N+2. And that can be from a DR or a business continuity standpoint. It also can be from a capacity standpoint. So I think the ability to dynamically flex and be able to run up workloads and not have teams waiting for resources to be provisioned on-prem and hardware shipping and things like that, but then be able to move them back when they need to. I think it's a really dynamic way for enterprises to now look at how they're consuming without having to re-architect and re-platform. Two things that I really love about it. The first is that because we're using bare metal instances, we can implement heterogeneous clusters inside. So as we talk about getting the efficiency and the density of workloads that run and putting them on there, we're not tied to an individual piece of hardware. We can flex and move and have different specs and configurations for customers. And the other part is that we deploy straight into the customer's tenancy, and the amount of product updates that we're sending out at the moment in line with how we innovate on premises, as well as replicating that in the cloud. It's a really exciting time for what we're being able to deliver for our customers.
Yeah, it's such a big distinction for us to some of our competitors' solution, and it really simplifies the product. And sometimes I think customers we need to talk them through that initially, because at first it looks like additional complexity. You've got to think of a few more additional components, whether it's AWS or Azure in terms of the networking infrastructure and those kind of pieces. But that additional kind of consideration gives you a lot of flexibility. You don't get the decisions of that taken away from you and someone else running that in their own kind of shadow account or those kind of the service provider account. You can make those decisions, and in making those decisions, you're doing that inside of your own account or your own subscription, so you can choose how you integrate that with perhaps your cost modeling, but also security as well. So we work with a lot of customers that are using AWS or Azure best practices. They're using cloud adoption frameworks. They're using landing zones, control tower. They're using service control policies. They're using IAM to kind of make sure that they've got a secure environment, maybe a sandbox environment or production or non-production or critical environment that they're running at different levels of there, and they can ensure that we fit into that modeling, and they can see it transparently that it fits. They're not being told that it fits and having to kind of trust that. They can see whether it fits because it's actually running in their own account as well.
With customers just going and deploying, and typically it was because data center's full, I can't get my resources in time, or I want to use this native service. Back then, it was more around the cost that was being incurred by the customer. And they were saying, I've got this shadow IT account in AWS or Azure, and this is what the spend looks like. I think as we've seen, say, the rise of ransomware, how sophisticated those attacks are becoming, we're seeing shadow IT pivot away from just unknown costs to being a real organizational burden. So when you think about how Nutanix are going through and approaching and helping customers not only sort of stop that technical threat, but also provide a really enhanced BCDR experience for our customers. How do you see that playing out? Where are we going with that roadmap? I know it's very exciting as to what we've got coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think shadow IT, you kind of have to remember that was, and still is, a response to constraints on a team that want to innovate. So typically that was just someone putting out their credit card and just getting access to the services that they needed and actually starting to innovate and delivering business value. But unfortunately, that didn't come with actually all of they would consider them constraints, but those kind of important security controls and cost controls that actually make it. So when someone comes to them and goes, I want to try this out, we go, yeah, cool. Here's a blueprint for something in AWS or Azure, standard self-service, or I can deliver a blueprint on premises. Just go and try it. Or if I need some scale for that, we can spin up an NC2 cluster. We can have that in a couple of hours and you can innovate that way. Our kind of maturity in that area around disaster recovery with cloud capabilities. So one of those is around multi-cloud snapshots. That allows us to take our disaster recovery capabilities, replicate them from on-premises, and land that into an object store in the hyperscaler clouds. What that means is you can run a very lightweight cluster, or as you're talking about the roadmap in the future, that will allow us to run zero clusters, so zero infrastructure. So you're only paying for the storage. And then when you need to, say it's a ransomware event, or even if you're just trying to avoid maintenance that's planned. So on premises, if you need to shut down for a power outage or something's planned about cooling maintenance or things like that, you can fail over, bring that infrastructure up and running, and run your business out of the cloud. And then when you need to, our disaster recovery capability will allow you to replicate just the delta back. So you don't have to do the whole data set back, just what's changed, and then bring it back in the original location. So that's going to allow us to really provide a secure, resilient, performant, but also cost-effective way of doing disaster recovery and really start to use the cloud capabilities. You can't really get that on premises between a DR site and a production site. You have to be running that DR site and the storage and everything the whole time with it. And we can get into kind of what that the disadvantages of doing that way.
Yeah, I love the way that we're now providing the ability for customers to get really granular with their approach. So that could be a VM that's snapshotted, and now you've got the ability to have these VMs protected under pilot light. So the cluster's always on and it's ready to go. So it gives them a really low RPO and RTO to get back up and running. Another subset of those machines might be a bit cooler and they're sitting in storage, and you can bring those up as you need to. But I think the fact that we can now automate across that whole stack, and again, we could do it under a testing scenario. So you may be under a regulatory compliance where every month you have to provide, can I actually fail over? And we're seeing governments now evolve as well, where they're saying, maybe not today, but tomorrow might be regulated, where you have to have an exit strategy from cloud A to cloud B. So we're giving the customers the ability to do that, as well as automate all of that overhead that they have today to say, I need to go and replicate my entire environment.
The last thing you want to do when you are having a ransomware attack, or you've had a fire, flood, or some kind of natural disaster, is trying to learn how to operate an entire new console. You want something familiar, and yes, there's still work that needs to be done to bring that infrastructure up, but it's something you've tested. It's exactly the same process as what you're doing on premises. If you need to create new VMs, new storage, and those kind of pieces to support restoring from backups or redeploying from a deployment pipeline, you don't have to relearn that and understand that. And it's also, as you say, that the longer you leave these things, the more stale they get. And if it's an unfamiliar environment that you're not really using in anger, then there'll be security groups that aren't configured correctly. There'll be routes that aren't in the place. There'll be missing components there. There'll be images that you haven't replicated, all those kind of pieces. And you've got to pick all those bits out and figure it out and remember how you operate that cloud console. Whereas with Nutanix, that ubiquitous and familiar layer between on-premises, the cloud, edge, is just easy and, as I say, familiar. You can just get on with recovering the business.
Yeah, and one of our recent product updates was around flow networking, and now we've extended those capabilities across AWS. We obviously have them today in Azure already. Often we talk about the layer 2 extension being, I suppose, the easiest path to go and migrate workloads into the cloud. But when we look at it as well from a BCDR scenario, the simplification that we can provide around automation of failover, failback, testing procedures, to your point around customers not having to worry about learning things and write new blueprints and automation patterns, that can already be put into the baseline for what's running today.
I think we talk a lot about layer 2 and being able to reserve IPs, and it's a real unique capability of this solution. And it really backs up when we talk about you can move workloads, legacy, and these kind of pieces. What does that actually mean? And is that kind of just a tagline? But when you look at capabilities around actually preserving IPs, that's where people, I think, get the aha moment. You go, okay, yeah, I can move that, and it starts up the same. When I connect to it over RDP or SSH or HTML or whatever the protocol is that people are using to connect and manage that server, they see no difference, including the IP address not changing, because who knows what dependencies are using that IP address. And if you're a mature organization, you might be doing load balancing, you're using DNS, and that's really good. Or you've decoupled things, you're using an event bus, those kind of pieces. But there's lots of legacy applications that have been built for many years, or that you may be very mature with your IT, but there's an acquisition that happens, and suddenly you've got to unpick dependencies in that. So being able to preserve IPs is really critical to be able to migrate those and lower the risk, and do that at pace as well. I would say, though, that layer 2 is one of those capabilities around with great power comes great responsibility.
Very big responsibility.
And a responsibility, and you are extending that failure domain. Yep. You're now, that layer 2 not only lives in your data center, but that same layer 2 domain, that same subnet, lives in the cloud. And everything underneath that, whether that be configuration or physical cabling, your direct connect, your express route, all those pieces are now in sight for egress traffic out of that single subnet. So we always talk through customers to go, this is a great capability, and absolutely use it. And we do have customers using it day in, day out. But also, can you re-IP, or can you cut an entire subnet over in one go? So we work with customers to, especially in a DR scenario. And if you talk about DR in the cloud, so maybe between two clusters running with AWS, for example, you can use a transit gateway with Flow Virtual Networking and have that route sending all the traffic to a Flow Virtual Networking and a cluster in one availability zone. and then you're replicating and you have all the subnets in the other availability zone within our cluster, but you just not have any routes pointing to them. And then when you fail over, you just update the transit gateway to point those routes at the other cluster. Super simple, but you don't need to worry about layer 2 stretch, and you've preserved IPs as well.
Yeah, I think it goes back always to failure to plan is planning to fail. So getting engaged at the right time, not just consuming in anger, and then trying to re-architect around what you've already built is really critical to making this successful.
Yeah, and I think people forget sometimes that not all the capabilities that they're used to on premises are in the cloud. So that ability to actually move, say, a subnet between two availability zones, you just can't do that natively in AWS. So you have to plan to re-IP virtual machines. Now, in the right kind of architecture that you're moving to in cloud, you abstract that. You don't care about an IP address. You absolutely don't. And I completely agree with that. You're building a load balancer. You're putting that target group across multiple availability zones. But if you're bringing those legacy applications that are pinned in your data center and you can't unpick them, or it's just too costly to unpick, being able to use like a Nutanix layer that allows you to mimic what you're doing on premises but in the cloud is really important as well. And is super powerful.
Chris, thank you for joining me today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
And make sure you check into the next episode of Nutanix Cloud Interlock, where we're going to scratch a lot deeper under the surface of what it looks like if you're actually running Nutanix Cloud clusters in the cloud. Make sure you click subscribe and like and share and all those things. And there'll also be a link below in the description where you can test drive Nutanix Cloud clusters running in the cloud today.